Hi everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Krystal and welcome to my channel. To those who have recently subscribed to this channel as well as liked some of my recent videos, I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your support. I see you. And if you're new to this channel and if you're just now seeing this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to get right into it. This video is about why I decided to go to art school in my mid-30s, and why I decided to share my age, or at least my age range, is because most often than not, I have seen students, or most students, who graduate from high school and go straight into college. You know, they're 18, 19 years old. But for me, I am in my mid-30s, like literally in my mid-30s. And I decided to go to art school, or go to a university who has an art program. And so this is kind of something that is unfamiliar. It might be unfamiliar to some people, but I want to share with you my story. I have my notes right here. And yeah, let's get into it. So my first degree was in accounting. I got my degree from an HBCU, an historically Black college and university, and that was many years ago. And for about 11 to 12 years, I worked in accounting. I did some finance. I did data management. That's the field that I was in. And for a long time when I was working in those areas, I felt a void. I felt very, what's the word? The word that comes to mind is unattached, or I didn't feel connected to the work that I was doing. You know, sometimes we kind of just go and do work on a day-to-day basis. We're just doing it because we're trying to get a paycheck and we're trying to provide for our family. And that was something that I was doing. But for me personally, I need to have some type of purpose or connection to my work. And so the question is, the big question is, why did I decide to do art? How did I go from accounting all the way to art? That's jumping one, side of the spectrum all the way to the other. Just a little background story on my childhood. I always grew up around art. And for me, it was always something that I did, whether it was, drawing or, making music, playing instruments, dancing, playing with textile art. And that was something that I was very highly interested in at the time, was working with textiles. And we would learn how to crochet. We learned how to, slip stitch. Or, sorry, not slip stitch. Cross stitch is what I'm trying to say. Working with a latch hook, a sewing machine, all of that stuff. So that was something that was a part of my childhood. But of course, as you get older, I'm in the millennials. I'm a millennial. So, going to school, getting a degree, and then getting a job was very important. I think that was something that we learned from, our baby boomer parents or what have you. And so that's what I did. I put all the art and the fun stuff to the side, and I went to school and I got a business degree. Because at the time I felt like, well, this is the right thing to do. This is going to be the thing that's going to secure my future. So I thought, but, things change. And so stay on track. Oh yeah. During my time while working, I read a book by Rick Warren called The Purpose-Driven Life. And that book really changed my perspective on what are we supposed to be doing with our lives, right? I am a Christian, and, I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe that book was what helped to put perspective around my life and the kind of work that I should be doing, because we're created to give God glory. You know what I mean? We're created to shine his light. And how we do that is the gifts and the talents that he gives us, and even the interests that we have that he gives us. We could use that for his glory by serving other people, helping others in our community, giving back in a way that, helps to not only fulfill others, but it fulfills us too. It's like, while you're pouring into someone else's cup, you're pouring back into yours, and, God smiles on that. And so reading that book really changed my mind on what am I supposed to be doing with my life, because I was in a period of time where I was heavily searching for that. And so now I read this book many, many years ago, and it was still a very long time before art ever came back into my mind. So after I read that book, I was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? What is the purpose? You know, I think everyone went through that time, or we went through an era where people were trying to figure out what is their purpose? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Because it's just, the work that we're doing was just very unfulfilling, and truly there must be more to life than just getting a paycheck, right? So in about 2019, during that time, I've had a family, I've been working, still working in the same, areas I've been working in, and I decided to pick up a hobby. And that hobby was drawing, because when I was young, I used to draw all the time. I used to love drawing portraits. And so I decided to go back to that. I said, you know what, I need something to do, because the weight and the stress of life was just getting too much. And if you don't have some type of, healthy outlet, you'll just, for a lack of a better term, crash and burn. Anxiety, stress will overwhelm you. So I started drawing. And one of the things that ignited me during a session that I did was just drawing and playing some music in the background to kind of help me to relax. I was drawing for a whole hour without even blinking. Like, I was just drawing nonstop. And yes, it's therapeutic, but for me, that spoke volumes, because I struggled to focus. I did. I really struggled to focus in the workplace, especially because the work was not engaging in a way that was meaningful for me. And so the fact that I was drawing for a whole hour straight blew my mind. And then another 2 hours, it blew my mind. So that was something that stuck with me. Yeah, I just kept evolving from there. I was like, well, you know what? This is kind of fun. I like this, and I can focus on it. It's relaxing. It's therapeutic. Maybe I should just keep going. So then I went and I, ordered some books from online. And my first book that I got, and I like to keep my books up here. The first book I got was a book called Lee Hammond's All New Big Book of Drawing. It's been a while since I've read it, but this was the first book that I bought that taught me how to draw in realism. And there was a artist here on YouTube, Sylvie Mondal, who I saw was drawing in realism, and I was like, wow, like, her art is amazing. And for some reason, as I continued to watch her content, I began to believe in my heart that I could do it too. It just was like, I believe you, I can do that. I can do that. So I bought a book to teach me how to do this. And this is where it all started. And so then I started buying more books, around art, and learning, how to be a better artist, and I was having fun with it. I was sharing it with my, my sister, my family, friends, and people were like, wow, Krystal, this is really beautiful. And so from there, I was getting a few commissions and everything. But then it got to a particular year, I was working in finance. I felt like God was calling me to go to art school. And at the time, it felt impossible. Like, art school, like, that doesn't make sense, God. I got a whole family. I have, responsibilities. Like, how can I go to art school, especially being in my mid-30s? But it was just something that I felt the Lord kept, placing upon my heart. And so I said, okay, well, you know what? Let me do some research on this. Let me look into it. Of course, going back to university, or any college, it is very expensive. How can this even be possible? How is this, something that can happen? But one thing I want to encourage you, as I encouraged myself, and, was, if God is calling you to do something, it may be impossible for you, and most times it will be. But what's impossible with man is possible with God. And he does not call you to a place where he will not provide. He does not call you to a place where he will not, order your steps, establish you, and make sure that you, have what you need, even if it's at the basic level. And so, I I said, okay. So I decided to go for it, you know, and it was scary. It was very, very scary. Yeah. So I decided to go to school. I went ahead on and I submit my application. You know, the Lord, and I did, you know, I applied for scholarships and, you know, look to see what are resources available for adults who are going back to school. And, you know, I found a few, you know, and maybe I can talk more about that in a separate video, how to look for scholarships and how to, you know, prepare for going back to college if you're an adult. If that's something that you might be interested in, just let me know in the comments below, and I can, you know, create a video to talk about that. But yeah, I decided to just take that step of faith. You know, it was really scary because, again, I had never seen anyone do it, especially in my circle of influence or people that I knew. I didn't know anybody who went back to school to get an art degree. It's one thing if you go back to school to get an education degree, a business degree, or, you know, law, whatever. But I never met anyone who went to school to get an art degree. So it felt foreign. It felt weird. But I knew that it was like a heavy weight on my heart that I knew that I had to do. And so I'm currently in school now. I'm finishing up my last year. But when I tell you that I'm so grateful that I decided to follow the leading of God and step out in faith and do this, it has significantly changed my life. And the reason why I say that, when I mean life, I mean like, you know, when you're in a space, when you're working in a space where it's like putting a shadow or it's like dimming the light on the inside of you, you know, you feel depleted, you feel depressed, you're anxious, you're tired constantly. It's like it's like, how is it possible for me to even get up in the morning and go to this job or go to this place? You know what I mean? And yes, it's scary to do something different, but if God is leading you to do it, I promise you that it's going to be worth it. I know what it's like to be on one side of the spectrum where, okay, I'm looking at this and I'm not sure, this is scary. But then after having, you know, spent time with the Lord and walked through it, the Lord has pressed me over to the other side. And I'll say one of the benefits of having gone back to school is when you are in art school, there's so much that you learn. You know what I mean? When you are a self-taught artist, that's great and that's wonderful if that's what you do, because I was a self-taught artist for a long time. But there are some gaps in your learning that happens, and it's not your fault. You just don't know all the things that you should know. You just, you know, you're just kind of learning. You know, there's not like a guide on, you know, okay, I should learn this, now I should learn that, because these two things complement one another. And I can do a separate video where I can talk more about that in detail if that's something that you might be interested in. But it really helps to fill in those gaps in your learning and growing as an artist. Not only that, you get exposure to, you know, other professional artists. You know, in my school, we have, you know, meetings, and we have professional artists that come in, you know, from around the city and around the state and everywhere else in the nation. And they talk to us about their experiences. They talk to us about, you know, how to work in, you know, as maybe a freelance artist, or, you know, how to prepare yourself for, you know, working with a company. It just depends. And, you know, you get access to those kinds of things, as well as access to, you know, internships and jobs. That I will be honest with you, when you are a working adult, it is hard to get access to these types of internships that students have access to, because employers and people come to them looking for them. And you know, when you're, you know, on your own looking for it, it's a lot harder to get your foot in the door. So that's another good reason, you know, to go to art school. And there's so many more. But yeah, if you would like to learn more about this, or you want to have more conversation around this topic of going to school or changing your careers, just let me know. Put some comments down in the comment section. I would love to hear your feedback. Please like this video, share it with someone who might find encouraging, and thank you so much, and you have a great day. Bye.